They say the White House never sleeps. Long after the lights dim and the dignitaries retreat, a hush falls over the halls of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But it's not the peaceful kind. It's the kind that listens. The walls hold secrets. The kind that don't fade with time. It began as a symbol, built by ambition, raised with the hands of enslaved laborers, polished by history's most powerful. Every president since John Adams has called it home. Yet even the most rational among them have whispered of things unseen. Night guards speak of footsteps when no one walks. Maids avoid certain corridors alone. And in private journals and fleeting interviews, even presidents have confessed, softly, that they felt watched. Not by the press. Not by the public. By something else. A former butler once said the house changes after midnight. The air thickens. The temperature dips, even in summer. And every so often, it feels like someone is pacing just out of sight. Not threatening, but expectant. That's the thing about the White House. It doesn't forget. Not the blood. Not the triumph. Not the grief. The echoes of power remain, long after the men and women who wielded it are gone. But three names rise above the rest. Three spirits said to walk its halls, not as echoes, but as lingering sentinels of their era. One paces the floor in silence, still burdened by a nation's pain. One storms through doors, unsettled by unfinished arguments and unspoken fury. And one watches the garden she once saved, her presence as gentle as the petals she adored. They are not legends told for entertainment. They are witnesses. Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Jackson, Dolley Madison, and they are still here. Their apparitions aren't merely stories passed between nervous staff. They've been seen, heard, felt, reported by prime ministers, queens, military aides, and cleaning staff alike. Some laugh it off. Others refuse to walk certain wings alone. The White House may belong to each new president, but it also belongs to them, the dead who never truly left. They are not waiting for recognition. They are watching. Each spirit carries unfinished business. Each ghost, a fragment of America's deeper story, one still unfolding inside this grand, haunted mansion. And tonight we walk those halls. We follow their shadows. We listen for their footsteps. Because behind the politics, beneath the chandeliers, and beyond the press briefings, lies a deeper truth. The most powerful house in the world may be shared by the living, but it still belongs to the dead. The phantom president, Abraham Lincoln. He arrives when the nation trembles. Tall, silent, dressed in black, eyes burdened by war. Abraham Lincoln was the 16th President of the United States. But to many who have spent nights in the White House, he is something more. Something eternal. They say he walks the upper halls long after midnight, never speaking, never rushing, just watching. The Lincoln bedroom, once his personal study, remains the epicenter of these sightings. And those who've stayed there speak with a strange reverence, as if they've glimpsed something holy or haunted. During World War II, Winston Churchill visited the White House. After a hot bath and a fresh cigar, he stepped into the adjoining room, naked, relaxed, unguarded. And there, by the fireplace, stood Lincoln. Impossibly tall. Ghostly pale. Solid, and yet not. Churchill stared. Lincoln stared back. With typical British composure, Churchill muttered, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have me at a disadvantage." And in a blink, he vanished. Another visitor, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, opened her bedroom door to a knock and saw Lincoln standing silently in the hallway. She fainted on the spot. White House staff say he appears in times of turmoil. One military aide during the Cuban Missile Crisis claimed he saw Lincoln's reflection in a hallway mirror, but turned to find no one there. Eleanor Roosevelt, though never seeing him outright, admitted to sensing his presence constantly. When working alone in his former office, she said she felt watched, not with menace, but with expectation, as though history itself sat in judgment. And perhaps it does. Lincoln lived with the weight of a fractured nation. He carried the Civil War in his eyes. When he died, shot at Ford's Theater. His work was unfinished. Some believe that work still ties him here. He doesn't speak. He doesn't threaten. But those who see him describe an overwhelming sorrow, as if he carries every drop of blood spilled under his presidency. One late-night janitor reported walking past the Lincoln bedroom and hearing a floorboard creak inside. Curious, he pushed the door open. The lights flickered. The room was empty, except for the distinct imprint of boots on the carpet, and the unmistakable scent of pipe smoke. What does he want? Maybe he's still trying to protect the Union. Maybe he's just remembering it. But whatever keeps Lincoln here, it is not rage or confusion. It is duty. It is grief. And in the White House, where power often changes hands overnight, his shadow remains steady, like a flag that never lowers, even when the winds of history howl. He was the president who saved the nation. Now, perhaps, its most loyal ghost. The thunderous shadow, Andrew Jackson. Where Lincoln's ghost is sorrowful and silent, Andrew Jackson's is anything but. He comes like a storm, hot-blooded, loud, and impossible to ignore. Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, was known in life for his explosive temper, stubborn will, and defiance of anyone who dared oppose him. He fought duels. He challenged courts. He rewrote power to suit his vision of America. And according to many who've worked in the White House, he never stopped. In the early 1860s, Mary Todd Lincoln, wife of the grief-stricken Abraham, held seances in the East Room, desperate to contact her lost son. But one night, she said, a different voice pushed through the veil, gravelly, coarse, spitting with rage. It was Jackson, she told a confidant. He was furious and wild. The Rose Room, Jackson's former bedroom, is now infamous among staff. One security officer, patrolling late at night, paused outside the door and heard someone shouting inside. When he opened it, the room was empty, but the air felt charged, as if a fight had just ended. Paintings hung askew. A chair had toppled. The smell of cigar smoke lingered. Another tale speaks of a presidential aide sent to retrieve papers from the West Wing long after hours. Passing by the hallway near Jackson's portrait, she felt her chest tighten. A low growl echoed from behind, a voice muttering unintelligible curses. She turned to find nothing, but the muttering didn't stop. What unnerves witnesses is not the sight of Jackson, but the force of him. Doors slam. Furniture rattles. Mirrors crack without warning. One butler claimed he locked up the second floor, only to return 5 minutes later and find a chair dragged across the hall. When he placed it back and turned away, it scraped again, slowly, defiantly, across the marble. He never worked upstairs again. Jackson's spirit doesn't watch like Lincoln's. It confronts. It invades. And his legacy, even in life, was divisive. A populist to some. A tyrant to others. His aggressive policies toward Native Americans, his disdain for banks, and his view of the presidency as a personal power source earned him both adoration and dread. Maybe his ghost still fights those battles. Or maybe he just refuses to be forgotten. After all, this was the man who once said, "I have only 2 regrets. I didn't shoot Henry Clay, and I didn't hang John C. Calhoun." If such fury burned that brightly in life, what could possibly extinguish it in death? The White House may house many presidents, but only one ever claimed it like a fortress. And long after his term ended, Andrew Jackson still slams doors to make sure we remember. The Lady in Lavender, Dolley Madison. Not all ghosts haunt with rage or sorrow. Some remain, with love. Dolley Madison, wife of the 4th president, was more than a first lady, she was Washington's heartbeat. Known for her poise, elegance, and unshakable courage, she set the standard for hospitality and political grace in the early republic. And if the stories are true, she still does. It was 1814. The British were marching on the Capitol. President James Madison fled to avoid capture. But Dolley stayed behind, long enough to save the iconic portrait of George Washington before the White House was set ablaze. What she preserved that day was more than art. She preserved legacy. and it seems she never stopped protecting it. In the early 1900s, First Lady Edith Wilson ordered the White House Rose Garden redesigned. Landscapers arrived with tools and sketches. But every night, something strange occurred. Tools were moved. Paths they cleared were mysteriously overgrown by morning. One night, a watchman spotted a woman walking among the roses, dressed in flowing lavender. When he called out, she turned her head and smiled, then vanished into mist. The project was quietly cancelled. Later First Ladies would report catching a sudden, inexplicable scent of lilacs in the West Garden, though no such flowers were ever planted. One military aide claimed to see the figure of a woman standing still beneath a moonlit trellis, hands clasped, eyes closed, as if remembering. Dolley's ghost, if it is a ghost, is not cold or frightening. It is watchful, gentle, protective. Where Lincoln mourns and Jackson storms, Dolley tends. She isn't bound by unfinished business or anger. She walks because she chooses to. Because the house still matters to her. One story tells of a night gardener, trimming hedges after hours. As he packed his tools, he saw a lady in lavender moving between the bushes. Thinking it was a guest, he approached to offer help. But as he drew near, she turned, placed a finger to her lips, and disappeared into the roses, leaving behind only the faintest scent of perfume. He never returned to the garden alone. Some believe Dolley Madison is the White House's oldest guardian. That she remains to ensure that beauty, civility, and memory don't wither under politics and time. She is not feared. She is respected. And for those who love the garden, her presence is more blessing than curse. While some spirits echo in fury or grief, Dolley Madison whispers in petals and perfume. In a house of power, she reminds us of grace. And long after the headlines fade, long after presidents come and go, she walks among the roses she planted, calm, elegant, eternal.
Please subscribe my channel so you can get everyday new real stories.